Nice to see you again, Jimmy.
Thanks.
You remember the old Buckhorn in Paso?
Yeah, you worked there?
5 years ago, when Tim O'Leary had it.
You don't look so tough to me.
Well, if he ain't so tough, there's been an awful lot of sudden natural deaths in his vicinity.
How many do you figure?
10, 12, 15, depends upon who's telling it.
I bet he ain't as fast as Wyatt Earp.
Dodge City, places like that, they say he is.
Just two hands like anybody else.
Hello there, this is Stormdog, and today I'd like to talk about The Gunfighter. Gunfighter is a 1950 Western starring Gregory Peck. The movie deals with a day in the life of a gunfighter who has built a reputation for themselves as a force to be reckoned with. But just like the figurative mountain, inevitably someone is going to look at it and determine that they will be the one to conquer that mountain. The movie starts with exactly a scene like this, as Peck's gunfighter, Jimmy Ringo, no relation to Kid Ringo that I'm aware of, enters a saloon and within moments is recognized by the bartender from another saloon in another town somewhere in Ringo's past. A young local man who believes himself to be the big fish in this small pond of a town overhears this and begins to size him up. His friends warn him against this, knowing the reputation of Ringo and knowing it not to be manufactured. In a sequence that we see mirrored throughout the movie, the young local tough reasons that Ringo isn't much to look at, and he has just two hands. There's no way he's that fast or that tough. The young man approaches Ringo and insults him, trying to provoke a reaction, but Ringo just wants to be left alone. The young man tries to claim Ringo has somehow insulted him. Eventually, when nothing else works, the young tough draws on the gunfighter. Beating him to the shot, Ringo kills him. When called for, witnesses step forward, agreeing that Ringo didn't provoke it, and the other man drew first. This is the often remarked in Westerns laws of self-defense in the West. Today, this may still work for police officers, but it won't for the common man anymore. Quickly, Ringo leaves town, not wanting to stick around for someone to try to get revenge, or the sheriff or marshal to hold a bigger inquest. However, the young man has three brothers who don't care what the circumstances were. Sure, their brother was young and foolhardy, sure he drew first, but that was no reason to kill him, they figure. Ringo ambushes, disarms, and takes away their horses. According to our cinematic law of the West, he could have killed them, but even gunfighters in Westerns who have a shady past are usually storytelling and folklore's current iteration of the knight errant, or later the honorable Ronin. He leaves them on foot. They realize what town he's heading for and decide to take the hours-long walk to catch up, despite no horses and no guns. Upon arriving at his desired town, Ringo goes to the saloon, often the social center of these films. Once again, the bartender, played here by character actor Carl Malden, knows him from somewhere in the past. Maybe it's just a way for all these bartenders to live vicariously. Maybe it's the fame chasing that mankind has always pursued, that desire to be able to say, I was there, or to have a souvenir from historical events, even if you personally took no part. Word quickly spreads through town that famous gunfighter Jimmy Ringo is here. The town marshal, Mark Strett, played by Millard Mitchell, comes over to keep the peace, and we find out that these two used to be in a gang years ago. Almost a decade ago, Strett left that life and eventually became the law in this town. In reality, this was very common in the West. You may be a criminal or undesirable in one territory, but go where the law needs to be tough, and the townspeople would be happy to pay you a salary for your ability with a gun to keep other toughs from causing trouble. Strett is happy to see his old friend, but not eager to see him hang around. He uses his deputies to make sure that the local young upstart tough doesn't come down to the saloon and brace Ringo. Across the street, upon hearing Ringo is in town, a father decides to assassinate him from his upstairs window. He believes that Ringo was the man who killed his son a few years before in another town. As soon as Ringo walks out those front doors, he'll let him have it.
What are you going to do? Jerry.
Jimmy Ringo's in the Palace Bar. And when he comes out, he's going to get this right in the face.
The local young tough, Hunt, played by Skip Homeyer, who guest starred in most every major TV series for a few decades, and was in Halls of Montezuma the year after this film. Remind me to review that one. Unfortunately, makes it past the deputies to the saloon to challenge Ringo. From the first few moments you see him, you see how self-important he is. Basically a bully because of his willingness to try out his guns. Hearing down at the barber shop that Ringo is in town, he starts reasoning with himself like the last young tough. Ringo doesn't look like much, he's only got 2 hands.
Heal me out. Who is it?
Jimmy Ringo.
Jimmy Ringo.
Uh-huh. What in the name of thunder is Jimmy Ringo doing in Cayenne?
Sitting right up there at the Palace Bar.
No?
Yeah, we just left him there.
What does he look like?
He's a kind of a natural man. He don't look much different from a lot of other fellas.
He looks mighty average to be such a big man.
About as big as they come, I guess.
How many hands has he got?
His challenge to Ringo does not go well and leaves his pride bruised. Ringo chooses not to take the chance to kill the kid. Despite the marshal ordering him to leave town for the day, Hunt hides and lurks around looking for his chance to brace Ringo again. The big reason Ringo is here today is to reconnect with his wife and son, who he has not seen in about 8 years. He doesn't necessarily have a plan for their future, but over the years his mind has changed. Now he just wants to be with his family. The wife and son have been living under a fake name so they can have a fresh start. The son doesn't even know Ringo is his dad. The wife has no desire to tell him and no desire to see Ringo either. Along the way, it turns out that the saloon singer also knows Ringo from the past and had been with a member of their gang until his death. She wants to help Ringo reconnect with his wife. However, unbeknownst to Ringo, the 3 brothers have significantly sped up their time of arrival. A clock in the saloon serves as our ongoing marker of Ringo's time running out and serves to illustrate how transient Ringo has had to live with the curse of the reputation of his skill.
Kind of getting on towards time, ain't it? I'm gonna give her till the last minute.
Now, there are 3 different entities trying to kill Ringo, drawing closer without his knowledge. Ringo, desiring to see his family, keeps taking bigger risks with his timetable. It's more suspense than action, with the movie having very little action. It's still a really good Western. I've loved this one since childhood. This and The Fastest Gun Alive with Glenn Ford both have little to no action or shootouts, but both are excellent pictures of the weight of reputation. You may win today, but eventually you'll have a bad day, like the first Undisputed film tells us.
He's a fighter, I'm a fighter. If I'm better on that day, I win. That's just the way it goes. Someday every fighter loses. Sooner or later, somebody comes along and they got your ticket. Too old, just wasn't your day, whatever the reason is. In the end, everybody gets beat.
Your next opponent may not play by the rules. Throughout this, we also have the local women's gossip group trying to boss the marshal around. She's played by Verna Felton, and I swear she's always looked old. She's done an incredible amount of voice work in classic animation. I do wish there was a widescreen version of this movie, but I can't find one. You can usually find it on one of the free streaming services or YouTube. The sets look really good, it looks like a real town, and the shops and the saloon where so much of the movie is look functional. You really start to believe this community existed, that these men rode the West at one point, with Ringo and Stret talking about their time with men like Wyatt Earp. As far as realism, Peck's character uses a left-handed cavalry draw, not something we see in a lot of Westerns. He has a period-authentic mustache that the studio absolutely hated. I can't remember another role where he has a mustache. The film did not do well on release, and the studio heads blamed the mustache of all things. Apparently, the movie is based on the life and exploits of an actual Western gunslinger named John Ringo, a distant cousin of the outlaw Younger family. The real Ringo was a ruthless murderer and survivor of the Vengeance Ride, engaged in by Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, after the ambushes of Wyatt's brothers Morgan and Virgil following the gunfight at the OK Corral. He was also involved in the Macon County War before this. Also, unlike the movie's account, the actual John Ringo, his real name, suffered a severe bout of melancholy following a visit to his family in California in July of about 1882 and went on a monumental 10-day alcoholic binge, which climaxed when he sat down under an oak tree, drew his gun, and used it to commit suicide. Although there were no witnesses of this death, this has led many to believe that Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, or some other gunfighter actually killed him. If you read the details of the scene of his death, how his body was found and its wounds, this is very plausible. In the movie Tombstone, this is the famous scene where Doc Holliday kills Johnny Ringo. In the book I Married Wyatt Earp, with supposedly excerpts from Wyatt Earp's own writings, Earp says he killed Ringo. It's however believed this book is not credible, but other dedicated Earp historians and other sources that ran with him also proclaimed this story to be true. Whatever the truth is, this is a very different depiction of that man. I have no idea if Stret is supposed to be somebody else from history. It's got a really good ending that hammers home the themes of the movie. Originally, the writers had a slightly different ending, but studio head Darryl F. Zanuck demanded it to be changed, and I honestly believe his ending is better. This was the studio head behind movies like The Sound of Music, the original Planet of the Apes, and Tora Tora Tora. That's not even scraping the surface of his influence in the industry. The movie had originally been offered to John Wayne, and he absolutely loved the story. A disagreement with one of the script writers and a separate disagreement with the studio head caused Wayne to lose the chance to star, and he was mad for quite some time, even at Peck himself. There are strong echoes throughout Wayne's later film The Shootist of this film here. Behind the scenes, Roger Corman had some influence on this script. One of the writers, William Bowers, also wrote Support Your Local Sheriff, an excellent comedy western with James Garner. Later, Gregory Peck said that this film was one of my favorite pictures of all the pictures I've made. I knew Peck most from To Kill a Mockingbird, Roman Holiday, a solid Audrey Hepburn romance movie, but I also like his MacArthur about the famous general, Cape Fear, a solid suspense movie, but he's done many incredible films. In 2003, Peck died in his sleep of pneumonia. This was one of the 6 films he did with director Henry King, including 12 O'Clock High, David and Bathsheba, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, The Bravados, and Beloved Infidel. King had been working in film all the way since the silent era of films. The Marshal was played by Millard Mitchell from such notable films as Singin' in the Rain, the classic Gene Kelly musical, Winchester 73 with James Stewart, 12 O'Clock High with Peck shortly before this movie, and he had uncredited voice work in The Day the Earth Stood Still. He died a few years later at 50 in 1953 from lung cancer due to smoking. As I said, Carl Malden was Mac, the saloon keeper, and is a recognizable bit player. He was in Patton, did a lot of Disney films like The Adventures of Bullwhip Griffin, and was even the Reverend in Pollyanna, and was Doc in The Halls of Montezuma, which I asked you to remind me to review. He was born in Chicago but raised in Gary, Indiana, and only spoke Serbian until he was in kindergarten. He was born Mladen Sekulovic but changed his name for film. Later, regretting this, he often put his birth name, Sekulovic, into various scenes where he'd ask an unnamed extra to do something in the scene throughout his film career. He is the actor who delivered the often repeated line, "Don't leave home without them," when he was doing advertising for American Express.
American Express traveler's checks. Don't leave home without them.
He died in his home in 2009 at the age of 97. As I said, this movie is usually widely available. Watch it in the original black and white, as Gregory Peck would have preferred. It's a solid character piece with more suspense than action that holds a dear place in my heart. I much prefer this film over High Noon. Until next time, this has been Stormdog.
You're Hunt Bromley, ain't you?
Yeah. You heard of me already?
Yeah, I heard about you. I heard you're a cheap, no-good barroom loafer. If I didn't have something else in my mind, I'd take them guns away from you and slap you cross-eyed.
You're asking for trouble, Mr. Ringo.
But you already got it, partner. Because I got a gun on you under this table. And it's pointing smack at your belly. Now, you gonna get out of here or not?